After 6 months of waiting for this thing to show up on eBay, I finally have the complete 35mm shooting system for the Bronica SQ. It's finally here, and it's beautiful. The 135N back, a 135W insert for shooting panoramas, and the focusing screen as well. The whole lot needed to shoot 135 film in the Bronica. Let's take a look inside and see how this all works. So we'll just pop open our 135 back. We just remove the rewind lever, and now we can just lift out the inner film magazine, and you can see this is the end magazine. It has just the normal 35mm frame size, has a spot for the cartridge to go into, and it's just all normal and boring. You're not interested in this. You want to see this. You want to see that panorama back. Well, here's the thing about this system. Even though this is the 135N back, this section, this actual film back, is the same for the N and W versions of this film back. This part is identical. There's no difference apart from the letter that's printed here. You can take as just a standard 135W carrier and pop it in the same way. And now your back has been transformed into a 135W. But how does this actually work? Because it's pretty cool on the inside. The mechanics are pretty rad. So let's take it out and have a look. So the first thing we need to realize is that nothing here actually changes. And how this works mechanically is fairly wild, because normally the film on these backs goes through vertically. If we take this 120 back here, we can see that normally the film goes through vertically. This one needs to go through horizontally. So to facilitate that, what they've done is something kind of ingenious. In here we've got two crown gears. We've got one here and one behind this little plate. So if I turn this, you can see it transforms the rotation from going in a vertical orientation to a horizontal orientation. And then this will rotate the gear here on the film magazine, which rotates the take-up spool and winds the film through the camera. I just find that absolutely crazy. But that's not even the coolest part. No. The coolest part by far is how it deals with the different frame sizes. The way the different film magazines internally work is honestly simple, brilliant, and just really clever engineering. And I love this kind of stuff, because you can see that the only difference really between the W back, apart from the film gate and the position of some of the rollers, is that they have two different sized gears. How does this actually work? Well, when the camera winds onwards, it's only going to wind on one rotation's worth of distance, which will wind the film on one frame. But if you use a different gearing system, you can move the film at a different distance or speed through the camera. So if you take this gear here, which is a fixed size gear, which is unchanging, and you couple it to a larger gear, it will move the film a shorter distance because the gear is physically larger. Compared to this gear, which is smaller, therefore the film will be moved a longer distance, which means it winds on further, allowing you to wind on a full panoramic frame. And that is such a clever little bit of design. It's just really ingenious. But not only that, to make this back consistent between the two different inserts, there's one more trick up its sleeve, and it's in here. So taking a look inside, we can see that the gear that couples to the film magazine is on a hinge. And it's actually rotating because it's coupled to another gear internally. But you can see it rotates around. This allows it to connect to both a smaller gear on the 135W and a larger gear on the normal frame magazine without needing to change any of this. So to produce both sizes of back, all they need to do is produce different internal magazines, stamp a different letter on, simplify your production, make everything easier and cheaper. And that is some real engineering genius. And I just find that to be absolutely fascinating and just amazing. That this is just all mechanical. It's beautiful. But if mechanics aren't your strong suit and you're actually here to watch me shoot some photos on it, let's get this loaded up with some Delta 100. So obviously I'm going to use the wide back because that's the subject of the video and it's the only one anyone's interested in. If you want to shoot normal 35mm, I'd use a 35mm camera. But we're shooting panos, so but just drop in our film can, pull a bit of film out, feed it between these two here. You kind of have to, it's a bit fiddly, just feed it through carefully. There we go, all the way through. Then we just have to feed it around, out to the take-up spool. I feed it in, and then I'm assuming I can just wind this by hand to get it to like take up to make sure it works. We just take our loaded spool, and it's kind of interesting how this goes in because it doesn't fit in normally. You have to kind of lever it in as a hinge, so you just sort of take it and you swoop it in. It drops in, lock our rewinding lever into the can so we can take up the slack later, and lock, closed. Gonna stick the back onto the Bronica. And the last thing we need to do is insert the focusing screen. So to do that on a Bronica, we just pop off the viewfinder. Here she is. And you can see there's a matte side and a shiny side. The shiny side goes up, but you can only put it in one way on this camera anyway because it's keyed. So we just pull these little levers back. And then I'm going to very carefully drop out that. And then take my other focusing screen and drop it in. Lock it down. In all fairness, I'm probably going to leave the 135 screen in permanently because it has the panoramic lines, but the entire viewfinder is for 6x6 anyway. And the only advantage that the old focusing screen has is that it has grid lines for 645, which I very, very rarely shoot. Pop the viewfinder back on. And there we have it. The 135 screen is in. We are now ready to go shoot some panoramas. Okay. So we're going to go with a 60th at f4. Get the seating area in. It's a very grey day out, so the lighting's not going to change very much. And there it is. The film back is winding correctly. One roll down. So after shooting a roll to the back, what's my verdict? Well, it shoots 135 film in a panoramic format. It does exactly what it says on the tin. And it is a pretty damn cool tool. The ability to just take a panorama back and stick it on the back of my medium format camera is actually really nice, and I do see myself using this back a lot in the future. Particularly when I'm traveling, I'll easily bring that back with me because it produces some very cool looking images. And even if you look at the negatives themselves, they are pretty damn cool looking negatives. In terms of aspect ratio, in terms of like composition, exposure, story, you know, all the things that make an actual good picture, well, a panorama back isn't going to help that. But the frame size is cool. Now, when it comes to shooting panoramas on the Bronica, you have 3 options that I have found. 1, shell out the cash for the 135W back. The second option is to get a 135N back and modify it to shoot the wider panoramic format. Now, I have actually seen a video recently on the Analog Community subreddit, I'll link it down below, showing a guy who actually managed to do this, and that's pretty damn cool. The third option then is to just shoot a 120 frame and crop it down. Now, if you're going to go along this route, you definitely should pick up one of these, which is the 645 120J back, because, well, it shoots a 645 image. And because it shoots a 645 image, you will get 16 exposures per roll rather than 12 on the standard 6x6 back. So if you're going to be cropping very heavily to get a panorama frame size, you might as well shoot a smaller frame to begin with and get more exposures per roll and save yourself a bit of cost per frame. And that is pretty much it for this video. It's all I have to say. You know, it's a 135 panorama back, shoots a panorama frame, does exactly what it says on the tin. Pretty cool. Will shoot again. Yeah, that's it. See you next time. I had it backwards. Damn it.